As dawn broke over the quiet fields of Cedar Grove, a chilling sound shattered the peace, the distant roar of engines and the relentless crunch of gravel beneath tires. A flock of crows took to the sky, their sudden departure an omen of the chaos that was about to unfold. Farmers across the valley would soon learn that this morning was unlike any other. The Vandals had come to wreck the farm. Some say you can sense the storm before it arrives, but for the Johnson family, who had tilled this land for generations, the signs were less tangible. It started with those fleeting whispers around town, rumors of a group that sought to tear down anything in their path. They called themselves the Reckoning, a name that carried the weight of fear and discontent. Their motives were murky, driven by shadows of anger that lurked beneath the surface of the community. But the Johnsons weren't one to buckle easily. They had withstood storms before, their roots deep in the soil. As the sun peeked over the horizon, light spilled across the farthest fields of the family farm. Each blade of grass glimmered as if touching the very soul of nature. Was it merely the golden sunrise or a silent promise that reminded them of what was worth fighting for? The heart of Cedar Grove thudded like a war drum, steady and unyielding. In the far corner of the property, where the old barn stood strong, Martha Johnson clenched her fists. With weathered hands, she felt the rough wood, a symbol of everything her family had built and nurtured. Her son Billy, no more than 12 but strong-willed beyond his years, stood by her side, his eyes wide with determination. He asked, voice trembling as memories of harvests past flooded his mind. "No," Martha said, her voice fierce yet calm. She turned towards the horizon, heart racing as she spotted the dust clouds rising in the distance. They were coming, and the time for preparation was now. While the heart of the family braced for the storm, the Reckoning had no such reservations. Their engines roared like lions, each vehicle a beast driven by the promise of destruction. They rolled into Cedar Grove like a tidal wave, led by a man named Harris, whose reputation for chaos followed him like a shadow. With a gaze that sparked fear and disdain, he urged his crew forward, fueled by the belief that power came from force and chaos could erase history. But Cedar Grove was not just a plot of land. It was a symbol, a testament of grit and love, of sweat and sacrifice. As Harris looked upon the rolling hills, he saw only potential for disaster, an empty canvas waiting for dark strokes of his ambition. Little did he know he'd soon meet more than just landowners. He'd clash with a spirit forged from the very earth he threatened. As the first vehicle rolled onto the property, a sense of resolve swept over the Johnson family. They gathered in the barn, a sanctuary filled with memories and now purpose. "We need a plan," Martha asserted, her voice cutting through the fear that loomed heavy in the air. Old photographs adorned the shelves, weddings, harvests, laughter shared over simple meals. Each image was a reminder of what was at stake. "Let's set up a barrier," Billy suggested, eyes bright with the fire of conviction. His courage resonated like the crack of thunder, birthing strength in his mother's heart. Together, they rallied their friends and neighbors, a small army rising to defend the land. In a world driven by chaos, the collective strength of ordinary people can forge resilience that challenges even the fiercest storms. As farmers from nearby properties joined the fight, they did not just bring tools, they brought stories of loss and hope, lives intertwined. Each brought their voice to the rallying cry that echoed through the valley, "This land is ours." Meanwhile, the Reckoning was prepared to dismantle everything the Johnsons held dear. Harris saw the assembled farmers, their faces lit with an indomitable spirit, and laughed. "You think you can stand against us?" His voice was a curling snake, dripping with contempt. But as the farmers stood their ground, determination etched across their faces, that laughter turned into an unsettling silence. The tension in the air thickened, heavy like a storm-laden sky. Each side measured the other, their intentions clear. It was not merely land at stake, it was a battle of ideals, a fight for what it meant to belong, to be rooted to the earth that sustained them. Billy, heart pounding, stepped forward. He shouted, voice trembling but brave. "We'll fight for our farm, for our families." His words hung in the air like a banner, waving defiantly against the winds of destruction. Inspiration sparked in the eyes of his neighbors, intermingling with fear and hope, but fear is a powerful weapon. Harris was cunning. He sought to break their spirit before the clash. With a wave of his hand, he commanded his crew to spread out, the ground beneath them rattling with the approach of machinery. Anger brewed amidst the farmers as they watched their land become a target, a canvas splashed with destructive intent. The first move had been made. The Reckoning charged forward, revving engines and brandishing iron tools intended for a single purpose, demolition. Yet amidst that sound of metal and chaos, the Johnsons and their allies formed a line, a barrier of humanity forged through generations of mutual support. The air crackled with energy as the two sides faced each other, hearts racing, breaths shallow. Martha found herself at the forefront, an iron will nestled in the depths of her soul. She proclaimed, voice rising above the chaos, "This is our home, our heritage." The words hung heavily as if the world stood still, listening to the courage poured forth from within. As the Reckoning advanced, emotions flickered like the embers of a dying fire. Fear could become courage, and courage could shatter the chains of despair. In that moment, a single act ignited the battlefield. Billy, with a resolve that belied his age, lunged forward, brandishing a wooden post he had retrieved from the barn. His stark defiance ripped through the air, propelling a movement initiated by sheer will. To his surprise, his neighbors followed suit. They rushed together, hearts racing, united against the tide of destruction that threatened to swallow them whole. A fierce rush surged between the two groups, clashing like titans at war. The Reckoning, caught off guard by unexpected resistance, found themselves met not with the chaos they had anticipated, but with a fiery force born of love and determination. Each farmer wielded not just tools, but history, the story of how they had built this land, nurtured it, and now stood resolutely against obliteration. The struggle unfolded with waves of passion and heart, as farmers held strong against the advance of machinery that sought to erase their existence. Every clash of wood against metal spoke of dreams, roots entwined fiercely in the earth, withstanding every blow. In that tangled mess, amid confusion and anger, had emerged something more, a brotherhood forged in battle. As the sun arched high, shadows stretched long beneath the fierce and relentless dance of struggle. Martha found herself fighting not merely for the farm, but for the soul of the community, for the memories encased between these fields, stories waiting to be told. She felt time slipping, yet the resolve took root deeper within her. Across the battleground, Harris faltered for the first time. The fire in the eyes of the farmers ignited something unfamiliar: fear. This wasn't just a fight against machines, it was a confrontation against the collective will of those who knew the land more intimately than he ever could. Every farmer knew the scent of the air before the harvest, the rhythm of the rain on their roofs. Their life was the land, and they wouldn't let it slip away easily. The sun began to dip low, washing the fields in hues of gold and crimson. As the day wore on, exhaustion wrapped around limbs like a firm embrace, but in the hearts of the farmers burned an undying flame. They fought into the dusk, losing track of time, grounded in purpose, unyielding. Just as the Reckoning sought to mount one final push, an unexpected ally emerged. A neighboring farmer, old Mr. Stevens, with a legacy of his own, advanced from the other side of the fields. The eyes at Cedar Grove glimmered, hearts swelling as hope swept through their ranks. A united front, once mere neighbors, became a family forged in fire and spirit. The Reckoning stood there, stunned as the tide turned. They were no longer a marauding crew, they faced a gathering storm. The final clash was a transformative moment where courage met desperation. Faces once filled with uncertainty bore the scars of determination and strength. No one backed down, no one faltered. It became a chorus of voices mingled in song, alternating between defiance and hope, proclamation and promise, resonating deep within the earth beneath their feet. In a frenzied moment, the Reckoning crumbled beneath the weight of that shared spirit, falling apart like a house of cards. One by one, they retreated, engines sputtering, abandoning their cause. Anger dissipated, leaving the farmers to breathe in the sweet scent of victory. Cheering erupted, a joyous melody cascading through the fields. Tears welled as the farmers embraced the embrace of humanity that had triumphed over chaos. Their hearts swelled with pride, not just for the land, but for each other. They had faced an enemy, and in their collective strength, they had forged an unbreakable bond. As night descended upon Cedar Grove, the quiet field stood undisturbed. The winds whispered tales of courage long into the evening. Shadows danced across the land, reflecting a somber beauty, a reminder that no storm is ever too great to weather, particularly when a community unites for a common cause. Martha looked out over the fields, heart full, as she smiled at her son, who echoed the courage instilled not just in him, but shared among generations. The Reckoning had come to wreck the farm, but what they found was fiercer than they could ever have imagined. The power of unity, unyielding spirit, and love deeply rooted in the soil. In Cedar Grove, they knew now more than ever they would defend their land, their stories, and their very essence together. No storm could erase the legacy written in the hearts and hands of those who dared to stand up and fight. Through the darkness, a new dawn awaited, as bright and formidable as ever. The sun dipped low over Maplewood Farm, casting long shadows across fields of golden wheat, but the serenity of the landscape was about to be shattered by the roar of approaching engines. Dust billowed on the horizon, a darkening cloud that signaled trouble. Unbeknownst to the Johnson family, a band of vandals had set their sights on this cherished slice of land, and they had no plans of leaving without a brutal mark. As the rumble of motorcycles grew closer, Sarah Johnson, a farmer's daughter with fire in her soul, sensed something was amiss. She stood at the edge of the porch, her heart racing. She spotted the shadows of men, no boys really, and the sight sent electricity through her veins. She called out to her father, Tom, who was mending a fence nearby. "Dad," he looked up, shading his eyes from the sun. Motorcycles, a lot of them. Her voice trembled, a mix of fear and adrenaline. In an instant, everything changed. Tom dropped his tools, his expression shifting from curiosity to grave seriousness. This wasn't just a random group of biker teens. This was a notoriously rowdy crew known around the county for causing chaos wherever they went. Their reputation echoed through bars and backroads, swift destruction, loud laughter, and no consequence. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed Sarah by the shoulders. "We can't let them in. This is our farm." We've worked too hard to lose it to fear. But even as he spoke, the engine noises grew louder, reverberating through the air like an ominous heartbeat. Sarah felt an ember of defiance ignite within her. She turned toward her father, her eyes fierce. Before Tom could respond, the first motorcycle roared onto their property and skidded to a stop. Dust swirled around it as figures dismounted, laughing boisterously, ignorant of the storm they were about to unleash. Leading them was a tall man with a devil-may-care grin named Jake. He strutted like a peacock, confident and reckless. Behind him, his crew spilled off their bikes, eyes glinting with mischief. Tom stepped protectively in front of Sarah, shielding her. He shouted, voice booming across the quiet fields. Jake's laughter echoed, hollow and mocking. "Oh, come on, old man, we're just here to have a little fun." Sarah felt a rush of anger surge through her. This was her home, and her childhood memories were etched in every blade of grass and rusted nail. She shouted, stepping beside her dad, fists clenched. Tom nodded approvingly. "You think you can just roll in here and do whatever you want?" But Jake only grinned wider, an unsettling energy crackling around him. This was going to be a challenge, and he enjoyed nothing more than a good game. "I think we can do whatever we want," he replied, gesturing at the group of boys behind him. They cheered, emboldened by his bravado. It started with a single toss of a stone, a deliberate aim toward the old barn standing defiantly at the edge of the property. The thud echoed through the stillness, awakening a fight inside Sarah like a lightning bolt. She screamed, but her voice fought against the roar of engines and laughter. Another boy surged forward, grabbing an old wheelbarrow full of hay and flinging its contents into the air, scattering straw like confetti. The laughter exploded into chaos, drowning out her pleas. Tom's blood boiled. He stepped into the fray, his voice steady and unyielding. "Leave my farm, you think this is a game? Built, what's worth preserving, old man?" Jake sneered, and suddenly the derisiveness left a bitter taste on Tom's tongue. Realizing she couldn't back down, Sarah took a deep breath, grounding herself in the weight of her family's legacy. "This isn't a joke. This land has our sweat, our tears, and our love." A flicker of surprise crossed Jake's face. It was a strange feeling. This girl, this mere slip of a thing, was challenging him. Mighty was the heart of a defender. He straightened up, the laughter dying down for a fleeting moment. Was he wavering? But he quickly regained his bravado, turning to his friends and daring them forward. "Let's see what they really have." With a snap of his fingers, the boys charged toward the barn, each one eager to wreak havoc. Tom surged forward, meeting them head-on, every ounce of a father's protectiveness coursing through his veins. Punches were thrown, chaos erupted, and the fleeting moment of hesitation dissolved. Sarah's heart raced as adrenaline surged through her. She did not want to sit by helplessly. She turned to grab the closest thing. A pitchfork leaned against the barn. With quick, sure movements, she brandished it like a sword, her fear transforming into determination. She shouted, her voice ringing clear amidst the shouts. The reckless faltered, looking at her with a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Pitchfork," Jake laughed, but there was a nervous edge to his voice now. Tom yelled, rallying the remaining nearby farmers as they began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the noise. They grabbed whatever they could, tools, equipment, and their own resolve. In a wave of solidarity, a barricade of ordinary people formed in defiance of destruction. As neighbors rallied behind them, courage swelled against the oncoming tide of the reckless. Sarah's heart sang as she saw the faces of everyone around her, men, women, even kids, all stepping forward, united. They held their ground like ancient trees facing a storm. A voice boomed from the crowd. It belonged to old Mr. Harris, a weathered farmer whose hard work had built the city around them. "You think you can just take what doesn't belong to you?" It was a potent reminder that families were not just linked by blood, but also by the earth beneath their feet, a bond forged through generations. With renewed passion, the farmers found their voices, claiming the rhythm of resistance. Their battle cry echoed through the fields, a chorus of unity rallying against the chaos of the reckless. Sarah could feel it rising like a storm. The potent energy igniting within her made the air crackle. She remembered all the nights they labored late, planting seeds, nurturing crops, celebrating the harvest. Those memories became their shield and spear. As the reckless attempted to advance, they faced an unexpected force of nature. The farmers surged forward, meeting them with fierce spirits. Tom swung a shovel while Sarah brandished her pitchfork, each movement reflecting the conviction and love they held for their land. The air grew thick with tension, and it felt as if time had slowed. Sarah moved with purpose. Each thrust of her pitchfork echoed her family's struggles, the late nights, the hardships, the joys of life on the farm. She felt raw strength coursing through her veins, an uncontrollable force fueled by the community standing behind her. Someone shouted, and it fueled the fire within each farmer's heart. They pushed forward, driving the Vandals back with sheer will. The energy of hope cut through the haze of fear, creating an unstoppable wave of determination. No longer was this just a fight against a crew of mischief makers. This was a battle for survival, for legacy, and it stirred something primal in everyone present. With one swift movement, they reclaimed the very ground that had given them life, their roots digging deeper than ever into the soil. The reckless were caught off guard. Laughter turned into unease, daring glances began to exchange doubts. That flicker of fight had been exchanged for fear, and the cracks in their bravado widened. With the scent of victory bubbling in the air, the farmers pushed even harder. The reckless found themselves retreating, stumbling over their own bravado as they fought against a tide they hadn't anticipated. In that fevered moment, the Vandals turned tail, their laughter replaced by yells of disarray. Once mighty gang of troublemakers scrambled to hop back on their bikes, engines roaring to drown out the sounds of defeat. But the cheers from the farmers echoed into the dusk, resilient and unyielding. As the sun cast its last glow over Maplewood Farm, the farmers stood strong, united and unbroken. Sarah felt a rush of relief wash over her, her heart swelling with pride for her family, for her neighbors, and ultimately for herself. Tom pulled Sarah into a tight embrace. "You did it, kid." His voice was thick with pride, the fight behind them now a shared victory. The air was electric with energy of resilience, a newfound bond forged amidst the ashes of chaos. From that day on, Maplewood didn't just stand as a farm, but as a testament to every struggle faced together, their roots intertwined in the rich soil they fought to protect. As night fell and darkness wrapped around them like a blanket, the stars emerged, twinkling brightly above. And as Sarah looked up, she felt a sense of belonging wash over her like a gentle tide. They were warriors of the earth, protectors of their heritage, and that was their true legacy. Together, they stood against the storm. Together, they would face whatever came next. And the heart of Maplewood would continue to beat strong for generations to come. The sun dipped behind the hills of Crestwood Ranch, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, but the peace of that evening was about to be shattered. As the last of the light disappeared, the deep rumble of engines broke the silence, sending a shiver down the spine of anyone still awake. A gang of vandals, notorious for wreaking havoc across the county, was closing in on the farm. The threat was no longer just a distant whisper, it was a storm brewing on the horizon. Inside the modest farmhouse, Anna Hayes watched through the window as the headlights cut through the twilight. She had felt it, the tension in the air. Her heart raced as she turned to her father, Joe, who had been tenderly tending to his vegetable patch just moments before. The change in his demeanor was instant. He commanded, his voice sharp and urgent. There was no trace of hesitation in his eyes, only the fierce determination that had kept their family together through years of hardship. Anna sprang into action, her pulse pounding in her ears. She found her younger brother Tommy tinkering with a toy in the back room. "Tommy, come on," she shouted, her voice laced with urgency. The innocent joy on his face faded as he sensed the chaos unfolding, and he followed her to their mother's side. "I don't like this, Anna," he whispered as they slid into the kitchen, where their mother, Linda, was brewing a pot of tea. The comforting aroma filled the air, contrasting sharply with the impending danger. "We'll be okay," Anna said, though doubt flickered in her mind. She felt the weight of fear pressing down on her like a heavy blanket, but she couldn't let it show. Their father had always told them that their family's strength lay not in their defenses, but in their resolve to protect what they loved. Outside, the gang rolled in like a dark cloud, bikes growling as they came to a halt in a cloud of dust. The air turned electric with anxiety as Joe stepped out onto the porch, placing himself between the intruders and his family, his stance wide and defiant. He shouted, trying to mask the tremor in his voice with a facade of courage. The leader of the Vandals, a burly man with a tattooed arm and a sneer that could cut glass, stepped forward with a chilling confidence. "We heard this place has some goodies worth grabbing. Just here to have a little fun, old man," he said, his voice dripping with malice. A rush of anger surged through Joe, but he knew better than to let his temper get the best of him. "You have no idea what you're asking for." The laughter from the group rang harshly in the night. "Home, look around you," they chuckled, their jeers filled with disdain. But Joe stood firm, heart pounding, knowing that his family's safety hung in the balance. As the gang began to stroll around the property, Joe felt a heat rise in him. He could see them kicking dirt and laughing as they approached the barn. It was the place where his father had taught him to mend fences, where they had celebrated countless harvests. Suddenly, that invincible pride swelled within him. A life's work was being threatened. Joe shouted, stepping down the porch, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The gang leader smirked. "What are you going to do, old man?" Joe clenched his fists, eyes steely. This was no longer just a show of bravado, it was about survival. He could hear Anna and Tommy behind him, their breaths shallow, and he knew he needed to protect them at all costs. With a shared glance of unwavering resolve, Anna stepped forward beside her father. "You can't do this. This farm means something." Her voice trembled, but it rang with a fierce conviction that made the Vandals pause. "Look at the little girl," the leader sneered, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his laughter now. The power of unity began to shift the atmosphere. Linda stepped beside her children, her arms crossed defiantly over her chest. "You're messing with the wrong family," she declared, voice steady. "This land has been in our family for generations." The gang seemed to hesitate, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed the leader's face. The power of a family standing together against adversity could turn the tide in an unexpected direction. Joe seized that moment of hesitation, his voice rising above the tension. You think this is just land to us. This is home. My children were raised here. As the words left his mouth, a tide of memories flooded his mind. Nights spent planting seedlings, mornings filled with laughter, and the joy of watching his children grow up surrounded by the beauty of the farm. He felt a surge of energy and defiance that lit a fire in his gut. The leader barked, fury igniting in his eyes. The gang surged forward, but before they could reach the barn, Joe raised a hand and stepped back, positioning himself before his family. He felt Anna's hand tighten around his arm, Tommy's small weight beside him, bolstering their collective strength. The air crackled with tension as the two sides faced off, a standoff brewing amid the settling dusk. Families often depend not just on resources, but on one another, and in that moment, Joe understood that love fueled their bravery. He could see Anna's determination reflected in her wide eyes, a fire flickering within her. She was ready to fight for her home. Joe yelled to the neighbors, who had been peeking through the windows, drawn to the commotion. They began showing up, armed with pitchforks, shovels, anything to defend their land. One by one, the farmers assembled, forming a line alongside the hazes. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they formed a barrier. There was power in numbers, and electric energy pulsed through them, fueled by the same fierce love and anger for their land. Anna felt a rush of respect for her community. These were people who understood the value of hard work, of sweat and grit, farmers who had faced storms and droughts but had always endured. The gang turned to one another, the smirks fading from their faces, realizing they were no longer just facing a family. They were facing a united front fueled by both love and vengeance. The flickering hesitation now transformed into fear, something they hadn't expected. One vandal muttered, taking a step back, but the leader wasn't backing down easily. "You think a bunch of farmers can scare us off?" he shouted, his bravado faltering. Yet it was too late. The collective energy of the farmers surged through Anna and her family. They would not let this go down without a fierce fight. With a determined shout, Joe commanded, "On three." The farmers raised their makeshift weapons. "Ready, 1, 2. The farmers surged forward with the battle cry echoing behind them as they charged towards the gang. The sound of clattering tools met the chaos of bikes in derision, the air heavy with the scent of adrenaline, fear, and defiance. Anna swung her pitchfork, aiming toward coats of leather. She felt a rush of exhilaration as she worked alongside her family, defending the land she loved. The vibrant clash unfolded like a storm, the energy swirling around them as they pushed back against the Vandals, who realized they had underestimated the power of a united community. With every swing of a tool, the farmers stood firmer, pushing fear aside and embracing their roles as protectors. The chaos of bodies and shouts filled the night air as the Vandals struggled against an unexpected tide of determination. The strength of the land coursed through them, and each heartbeat resonated with the fervor of pure defiance. One by one, the gang began to falter. The laughter faded into confusion, and confusion morphed into pure panic as the farmers pressed on. They were driven by a common goal, to defend what was rightfully theirs, to stand tall and fierce against those who thought they could come in and disrupt their way of life. As the fight reached its fever pitch, Joe caught a glimpse of Jake, the leader, trying to rally his crew. He saw the fear etched across his features, a realization that they were losing and fast. With one last push, the farmers surged ahead, forcing the Vandals back to their bikes, the fight draining from their spirits. "Go," Joe shouted as the last of the gang scrambled to their motorcycles, fear propelling their movements. The moment their engines roared to life, the air shifted. The threat, once imposing, now fled like shadows retreating before the dawn. As the dust settled, the farmers stood amidst one another, chests heaving from the exertion, eyes sparkling with triumph. They had not just defended their land, they had defended their history, their future, and their unwavering bonds. Anna looked up at her father, and their eyes met, a beautiful melding of pride and relief. They had fought for their home together, and in doing so had solidified their history even more deeply than before. The night slowly transformed, stars emerging to witness the hard-fought victory. The air felt different now, charged with energy that spoke of resilience and strength. It wasn't just about the land, it was about standing together, forging bonds that could withstand any storm. As Joe embraced Anna and Tommy, Linda's voice rang out above the night. "We are more than just farmers, we're a family and a community." The echoes of her words wrapped around them, a gentle reminder of what it meant to fight for not just land, but for each other. Together, they faced down not just Vandals, but the bondage of uncertainty, ultimately finding hope where there could have been dread. Crestwood Ranch stood proud under the night sky, a beacon of perseverance, woven together by love, humanity, and fierce resistance. The Vandals had come to wreck the farm, but they had underestimated the heart of a family and the strength of a united community. In that moment, Anna knew they would face whatever else came their way. Together, they would persevere, ready to tackle any horizon that beckoned and protect their sanctuary until the very end. The night was draped in a haunting stillness when the distant rumble of engines broke the silence. A chill settled over Millstone Farm as headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the fields like invasive spotlights. It was dusk, and the tranquil life on the farm was about to spiral into chaos. As the sounds intensified, Clara, a young woman with the spirit of a lion, sensed something was wrong. She stood at the rear of the farmhouse, eyes fixed on the horizon where shadows danced ominously. "Mom, Dad," she shouted, her voice taut with urgency. From the stove, Clara's mother, Ruth, looked up, worry etched across her face. Her husband, Gary, stepped out of the living room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "They're coming," she managed, her voice trembling as her eyes darted between the growing figures. A chill ran down her spine as the engines revved with an eerie excitement. Gary's expression hardened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "They say they're the reckless," Clara replied, her voice sinking lower as the realization clawed at her. The very name sent tremors through the town. They called themselves Vandals, a gang known for uprooting lives and tearing communities apart for sheer thrill. "Get inside," Gary shouted, quickly ushering his family into the house, slamming the door shut behind him. Clara's heart raced as she could hear the gang approach, laughter ringing through the air like harbingers of disaster. She could visualize them, young, arrogant, untamed, a pack of wolves seeking to conquer what they saw as prey. Ruth asked, her voice shaky, teetering on the edge of panic. "Just to have fun," Gary muttered, that same determination filling his tone as he quickly scanned through the window blinds. The engines came to a halt and Clara squeezed her mother's shoulder, grounding herself in the moment. "We can't let them take our home." "Clara, you don't understand what they're capable of," Gary said, turning with a firm gaze. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than mere vandalism. It felt like a declaration of war against everything they held dear. She glanced at her father, the man who had spent years nurturing this land, pouring his heart into every crop, every fence post. The land was not just soil, it was their legacy. "Dad, please," she implored, her eyes sparkling with fierce resolve. "We have to fight for it." Before Gary could reply, a loud crash erupted outside as one of the gang members kicked over a trash can. The noise echoed through the air, sending Clara's heart into a frenzy. Shouted Jake, the gang leader, his enthusiasm contagious among his crew as the sounds of hooting echoed. They were ready to unleash chaos, and in that moment, Clara knew the time for inaction was gone. She said, determination burning fiercely in her veins. Ruth protested, but Clara didn't hesitate. She stormed toward the door, swinging it open, feeling the cool breeze hit her like a wave of strength. "We can't let them take it," she shouted again as the gang turned their attention to her, surprise flashing across their faces. "Look at the little girl trying to play hero," Jake scoffed, amusement dancing in his eyes. Clara met his gaze with unyielding courage. "You're wrong, this isn't a game to us." Jake continued to laugh, the sound bitter and cutting, but Clara felt her heart pounding like a war drum. It awakened something deep within her, a relentless will to protect everything her family had built. Gary stepped out beside Clara, stance wide and resolute. Jake's bravado faded slightly, realizing this family wouldn't back down easily. He gestured to his crew as if rallying them for an attack. "Yeah," Clara shouted, emboldened by the strength radiating from her father. The tension hung thick in the air like a storm preparing to break, and bounded toward Clara and Gary with an unsettling confidence. Gary shouted, raising his arms in warning, "You want to play games." But the rush of reckless excitement propelled the gang forward, laughter and mocking yells mixing with the night air. Clara felt her stomach twist with fear, but deeper than that was fury, rising like a beacon against the darkness threatening to consume them. Suddenly, the back door swung open, and Ruth stepped out, brandishing a frying pan, a fierce glint in her eye. "I've had enough," she yelled, her voice commanding and resolute. The gang paused, stolen laughter dying in their throats. The courage of a mother was a force to be reckoned with. Clara felt a rush of pride surge through her as her mother held her ground. Clara exclaimed, touched by her mother's unexpected bravery. Jake's laughter broke the tension as he smirked, turning to his crew. But Clara saw fear ripple underneath the bravado. Gary bellowed, facing the encroaching danger with newfound courage. The family formed a united front. They knew they were not just fighting for their home, they were protecting each other, their way of life. "Everyone," Clara shouted, her spirit lifting the air around her. At that call, nearby neighbors emerged, drawn by the commotion. With pitchforks, rakes, and shovels, they stood with the hazes, forming a makeshift barricade against the uninvited chaos. Ruth raised her frying pan higher. "This is our land." Determination rippled through the gathering crowd, igniting a fierce resistance. The reckless turned and faced not just the haze, but an entire community willing to defend their honor and their home. Clara felt adrenaline fire through her as she looked among those gathered. Each face was etched with stories, labor, and love for their land. They were all interconnected by roots much deeper than the gang could ever understand. Until that moment, Clara had felt the weight of fear, but now she could sense the tide turning. She shouted again, the echo reverberating through her neighbors and friends, bolstering their spirits. Jake hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "We don't need this," Clara affirmed, raising her pitchfork. And in that instant, the reckless realized they were no longer the formidable force they had believed themselves to be. They faced a coalition of fierce hearts, joined by the well-worn history of the land they all shared. The commotion reached a fever pitch. With every shout and advance from the Hazes and their friends, the gang leaned back, uncertainty creeping into their bravado. It struck Clara like a lightning bolt. This was not just a battlefield, but a testament to unity. As the standoff wore on, Jake's bravado began to melt into desperation. "Let's go," he shouted, turning to flee. For Clara, it was like a shot of liberation coursing through her. They could win. They could reclaim their home. With a fierce battle cry, Clara charged forward, pitchfork raised, joined by her neighbors who surged ahead like waves crashing onto the shore. Each determined farmer pushed back against the tide of destruction that had threatened to engulf them. The reckless turned tail, scrambling to their bikes and revving the engines, desperate to retreat. Jake shouted until Clara's feet pounded toward them, imbued with purpose. "Stay away from Millstone Farm." She yelled, her voice ringing with authority. And it was in that moment, surrounded by the strength of her family and friends, that she felt invincible. They had turned the tide. Together, their fierce resistance had ignited a flame of hope and renewed spirit, glowing bright against the darkness that sought to extinguish it. As the last of the gang faded into the distance, their taunts became whispers, swallowed by the night. The air grew still, filled only with the sound of heartbeats that pounded with victory. The farmers began to cheer, laughter ringing out as the realization washed over them. They had defended their home, claiming their ground from those who would destroy it. Clara stood with her family, tears welling in her eyes as the weight of relief flooded her. Gary pulled Clara and Ruth into a fierce embrace, and they stood together, tired but triumphant. Around them, the community gathered, united by a shared experience that solidified their bonds. What had started as a chaotic invasion had transformed into a celebration of resistance, love, and grit. In that moment beneath the stars, Clara understood the true essence of their farm. It was more than land, it was home, love, and the spirit of countless generations who had come before them, tilling the earth with hopes and dreams. Millstone Farm would endure, it would thrive, and so would its people. They were a family, a community, rooted deeply in the land, and they would rise, steadfast against any storm together. With courage igniting their hearts, they knew they could face whatever came next, ready and resolute to protect all that they held dear. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Pine Hollow Farm when the rumble of motorcycles shattered the evening calm. Dust hung in the air, swirling like an angry storm cloud as a band of reckless youth descended, their laughter echoing off the well-tended fields. In that moment, the idyllic life of farmers Charles and Mary Thompson was interrupted by the menacing approach of intruders known around town as the Reckless. They thrived on chaos, and they had come to wreak havoc. From the kitchen window, Mary caught a glimpse of headlights cutting through the dimming light. Her heart sank as a sense of impending dread washed over her. She called, the tremor in her voice betraying her calm facade. Charles, strong and steadfast, looked up from the old oak table where he had been finishing his evening chores. He asked, sensing her urgency. She pointed, her fingers shaking. They both rushed to the window, and as the gang rolled onto their property, revving engines and shouting jokes, Charles felt a tight knot of fear form in his stomach. "Not now," he muttered, grinding his teeth. They were supposed to be preparing for the harvest. Instead, chaos was brewing at their doorstep. Mary asked, worry etched across her face. "No," Charles replied, his jaw set. "Let's see what they want first." Outside, the gang had dismounted, swaggering toward the farmhouse with a casualness that only emboldened their intent. The leader, a tall figure with tattoos snaking down his arms, flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He shouted, his voice a medley of mischief and malice. Charles stepped onto the porch, heart racing but posture strong. He bellowed, the laughter from the group crescendoed. The leader sneered, his voice dripping with derision. "You shouldn't have come here," Charles replied, unwavering, but he could feel the fear gnawing at the edges of his composure. This was his home, the place where he had raised his family, nurtured the soil, and weathered countless storms. He wouldn't let it be trampled. Mary's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped outside, joining her husband on the porch. She shouted, her eyes filled with a fierce determination she had cultivated over years of hardship. One of the gang members laughed, waving mockingly. Before Charles could reply, the tension snapped like a twig underfoot. The gang surged forward, led by their ringleader, who was ready to prove his point. But in that moment, Mary felt a deep-rooted courage rising within her. She shouted, the words blazing from her lips. Something shifted in the air. Clara, their 16-year-old daughter, hesitated at the top of the stairs. She could sense the rising tide of danger, but also the intoxicating rush of defiance overcoming her family. "Mom, Dad," she called, her voice full of youthful conviction. In a heartbeat, Clara descended the stairs, a fire igniting in her own heart as she joined her parents on the front porch. "This is our home." The Reckless paused, caught off guard by the unexpected kinship of the Thompsons. The laughter died down and doubt crept into the eyes of a few gang members. They were striking fewer confident poses now. Jake, the leader, laughed, pointing at the pitchfork Clara had instinctively grabbed from the nearby shed. Clara shot back, brandishing it like a sword. She had spent her childhood learning how to care for the farm, but now she was prepared to defend it. The silent echoes of her parents' hard work reverberated in her heart. Then it happened. A surge of passion swept through her, electrifying the air around them. A powerful bond began to form between the Thompson family, an unyielding wall of resolve against the growing tide of disrespect. Charles turned to the chaos erupting before him and bellowed, "You think you can roll in here and take away what we've built? We've planted these fields. We've nurtured these animals." The farmer's words resonated, and for a moment the gang hesitated. They had come to rattle the Phillips to dismantle their peace, but instead they were up against a fierce family fortified by their love for the land. Feeling emboldened, Mary jumped in. "Our home isn't just a collection of buildings. It's where our family thrives." That was it. Something flickered in Clara's chest, and she felt the pulse of hope. "You think you can scare us? We've withstood storms. We've faced droughts." The family shouted, each voice layered in harmonized defiance. The Reckless tried to recover, Jake waving his hand dismissively. "You think this is going to intimidate us? This is just a little fun," he said, though his nerves were starting to show. But Charles stepped off the porch, firm yet calm. "Your idea of fun ends where our struggle begins. You think you're tough." The tension radiated between them like the heat from 1,000 suns, each rivaling force ready to unleash decades' worth of fear, hope, and resilience. Suddenly, a voice rang through the air. It was Hector, a neighboring farmer. He had heard the commotion and rushed over with his own pitchfork. He shouted, standing shoulder to shoulder with Charles. One by one, the other neighbors gathered, sleepiness melting away as they united for a common cause. Each farmer arrived wielding tools, shovels, rakes, even frying pans, completely prepared to defend what they cherished. Mary saw the growing line of allies coming together like a tapestry stitched with a shared history. This was more than a fight against a couple of delinquents. It was about the heartbeat of their community standing together against a common threat. The Reckless had dealt in chaos before, but they had never faced a family and their loved ones unearthing their strength. A fierce resolve enveloped the farmers as they found the courage to stand firm, every beating heart echoing the love they had for their land. Each farmer paired with their tools, the atmosphere thickening with tension and determination. Clara felt exhilaration bolt through her blood, not just from the impending fight, but from the newfound camaraderie surrounding her. This was a defining moment, and she was part of something much larger than herself. Charles asked, glancing over the brave faces around him. Mary shouted, emboldened by the support. It was a rallying cry that surged through her community, resonating beyond their small town against anyone who might dare challenge them. Jake stepped back, uncertainty filling his eyes as he snapped his fingers, unwilling to back down but grasping the need to protect his own crew. With a nod of his head, he signaled his gang to attack, but the confidence in their movements had diminished. Instead, it was Clara who charged forward, pitchfork raised high. She cried, and something shifted in the space between them, a powerful wave of determination that could shake mountains. The farmers rallied, forming an unbreakable wall of unity. With every thrust of pitchfork and shovel, they pushed back against the gang, bolstered by their history, their spirit, and the strength of families intertwined. Laughter turned to shock as the Reckless found themselves tumbling back. Clara faced one of the gang members, determination etched in every feature. They had come seeking destruction, but they met an army rooted in love, driven by purpose. Nothing could keep them from their land. He yelled, swinging it toward the gang. Chaos raged, but amidst the frenzy, Clara found herself thriving. With each motion, memories of her childhood filled her heart, the laughter at harvest festivals, the quiet moments spent with her parents amid the rows of crops, and the heart that pulsed with the spirit of the land they cherished so much. In that overwhelming moment, she felt invincible, surrounded by a community that stood by her side. The Reckless were losing ground as it became painfully clear that this was more than just a fight. It was a testament to resilience, a fight for love, family, and legacy. Charles shouted, his voice ringing out like a clarion call. The gang's laughter faded, replaced by curses and shouts of confusion. The farmers, fueled by righteous anger and unshakable determination, pressed forward, forcing the Reckless back onto their bikes. One by one, they retreated, slipping through the chaos they had sought to unleash, retreating as the Thompsons shouted out their last battle cry, a dynamic harmony that signaled they would not back down. With the final burst of energy, the Reckless fled, engines roaring as they disappeared into the distance, leaving only clouds of dust and echoes of their laughter behind. As the last of the noise faded, a wave of relief washed over Clara and her family. They stood together, panting and exhausted, hearts racing with victory. Neighbors cheered, voices harmonizing in song, celebrating not only the battle won but the unity forged through courage. In that moment, they were more than just a collection of farmers in a small town. They were a family, united through struggle and resilience, determined to keep their legacy intact. Clara glanced at her parents, their faces glowing with pride, knowing they had protected what mattered most. "Let's celebrate," Mary said, a joyful smile breaking through the remnants of the previous tension. Underneath the stars, the farmers embraced and found solace in camaraderie. Each heartbeat echoed the beauty of their shared history, a testament to the determination that can rise in the face of adversity. Pine Hollow Farm stood strong under the vast night sky, a beacon of resilience glowing for generations to come. The Reckless had come to wreck the farm, but they had underestimated the power of love woven into the very fabric of the land, a reminder that together, they were an unbreakable force against any storm that dared to cross their path. And with that unyielding spirit, they would continue to thrive hand in hand, united and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun hung low in the sky over Cedar Creek, casting a warm glow across rolling fields of corn and vibrant vegetable patches. But just as the day seemed to be wrapping in the soft light of evening, a sudden roar of engines disrupted the peaceful setting. A group of motorcycles approached, kicking up dirt and chaos in their wake, their sound echoing maliciously through the otherwise serene valley. Inside the cozy farmhouse, Sarah, a young girl with a spark in her eyes, stood at the window, watching as the shadows grew larger and darker. "Mom, Dad," she shouted, her heart racing with an instinctual fear that something was terribly wrong. In the kitchen, her mother, Anne, stirred a pot of stew, glancing up skeptically. "Motorcycles," Sarah exclaimed, pointing outside, her voice trembling with urgency. Her father, Tom, appeared from the adjoining room, wiping his hands on his work-worn jeans. The peaceful atmosphere shattered as he joined his daughter at the window. The gang, known locally as the Reckless, rode in like a storm, causing the air to thrum with tension. "You stay inside," Tom ordered, his voice steady yet filled with an urgency that demanded respect. Heart pounding, Sarah shook her head defiantly. "No, we need to stand together." "He's right, Sarah," Anne said, concern threading through her voice. But Tom's firm gaze remained fixed outside, lifetimes of hard work reflected in his eyes. As the bikes roared to a halt, laughter erupted from the gang, echoing off the farmhouse walls. The leader, a tall, tattooed man named Jake, swung off his motorcycle with the confidence of a predator ready to hunt. He strutted towards the farmhouse, a swagger that dripped with contempt. "Hey there," he shouted, smirking widely. Tom stepped outside, heart racing but his face resolute. "You need to leave." Jake laughed, the sound laced with an edge of menace. "Trouble? Oh, we're just here to have a good time." Anger bubbled inside Tom, but he couldn't let rage control him. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he warned. "This is more than just land to us. This is our home." At that moment, Sarah realized her father's quiet resolve was a call to action. This wasn't just about him or her mother, it was about them, about their entire family. They had to defend what they loved. With adrenaline pulsing through her veins, Sarah stepped forward, joining her father. "You can't just come here and ruin our lives," she shouted, her voice strong, even as the air trembled with fear. The gang chuckled, clearly unimpressed by the defiance of a girl. "What's this?" Jake sneered, his confidence unwavering but the tension palpable. But behind that veneer of bravado, Sarah could see cracks forming. There was a flicker of uneasiness among the gang members, and she sensed an opportunity. "We fight for our home, not just against you, but for all who have lived here before us. You don't know the love and hard work that built this place," she cried, letting her heart speak. Tom placed a protective hand on her shoulder, proud of the fire igniting within her. The gang hesitated for the first time, the laughter dying down. This wasn't a fight against people, it was a challenge against a powerful spirit committed to protecting its roots. "Listen, little girl," Jake said, attempting to regain his control. "You don't scare me." But the fire was spreading, igniting the hearts of the nearby farmers who had heard the commotion and were now gathering on the edges of the property. Folks who had tilled this land alongside Tom for years stepped forward, wielding pitchforks, shovels, and tools of defense. The commotion transformed the air, filling it with a potent mixture of courage and resolve. "Hey," shouted Hank, a burly neighbor standing beside Tom. The solidarity resonated, and one by one, familiar faces joined the fray, forgetting their reservations and standing resilient. Shouted Leela, a woman who had grown up working on these farms. "This land isn't just dirt." The Reckless found themselves outnumbered, and the facade of confidence began to waver. Jake looked around, the laughter fading from his lips as he tried to muster some semblance of authority. "Hey, come on guys, it's just some farmers with tools. Let's not get carried away," he feigned bravado, but even his crew could hear the uncertainty slip into his voice. Together, the farmers stood strong, pushing back against the chaos that threatened to engulf them. Sarah felt the warmth of community wrap around her, a shared sense of belonging that could shatter walls and create unbreakable bonds. Tom shouted, raising his voice to rally their spirits. "We will defend our home together." Each farmer took a step forward in solidarity, their collective heartbeat resonating in the air. It was overwhelming, a force fueled by love, years of hard work, and the determination not to lose what mattered. Clenching her fists, Sarah found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotion. The Reckless were not just intruders, they were standing against every farmer who had poured their labor into the land. She shouted, her voice igniting the energy around her. "This is our home." The gang, recognizing the unity radiating from this band of staunch defenders, couldn't hold on to their bravado. "Let's get out of here," one of the gang members muttered, his confidence draining before their very eyes, but Jake refused to back down completely. He shouted, signaling his crew to charge. They rushed at the farmers, but the waves of courage bore down like a relentless tide, pushing back against their selfish greed. Tom led the charge, swinging a pitchfork with all the strength he could muster. He declared as neighboring farmers joined him, raising their tools high like a chorus bolstered by a common purpose. Clara's heart raced as chaos erupted. She grabbed a nearby shovel, using it to block incoming blows from gang members who had once seemed invincible. Every swing of her shovel, every thrust of her pitchfork, spoke volumes of generations of hard work, resilience, and love for the land. With every strike, the reckless began to falter, their confidence draining like sand slipping through their fingers. Each farmer felt empowered, drawing strength from the land they cherished and the shared victory that was just within reach. "Don't give up," Leela shouted, her voice cutting through the tumult. Amidst the frenzy, Sarah caught sight of Jake, his bravado fading into panic as he stumbled backward, caught off guard by the ferocious unity of the farmers. He yelled, glancing uneasily at his friends. The tide had turned. The reckless stumbled back toward their motorcycles, scrambling in a frenzy. The thrill of chaos had given way to fear as the community of Cedar Creek proved that no amount of reckless abandon could extinguish the light of love and dedication they held for their land. Tom declared with authority that reverberated like thunder. As he gestured toward the confounding sight of the gang retreating, a wave of triumph washed over the farmers. A cheer erupted from the assembled townsfolk, ringing through the valley like a victorious anthem. Clara felt elated, pride swelling in her chest as she shared a triumphant glance with her father. With every swing of the farmers' tools, they had defended their legacy. They were stronger together, not just as a family, but as an entire community determined against those who sought to destroy them. As the reckless roared away, fading into the horizon, the dust they had kicked up hung in the air, a reminder of the shadows that had approached but now receded. Tom turned to Sarah and Anne, pulling them into a tight embrace, their hearts racing in unison. He exclaimed, overwhelmed with emotion at the display of love and bravery. Everyone gathered around, camaraderie flowing through the crowd. Tears mingled with laughter as they shared stories of the battle, each person recounting their part in the fight against adversity. From neighbors to friends, a collective strength had forged an unbreakable bond. Leela declared, raising her tool in triumph. A swell of laughter and joy filled the air, a voice of a community more alive than ever beneath the stars. Cedar Creek had stood united, and from that night forward, the bond they formed would resonate through every harvest season, reminding them of the spirit that could never be broken. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the night sky awash in hues of indigo and gold, every farmer knew they could face whatever road lay ahead, united, fearless, and resolute on the land they loved. In the face of chaos, they had not just protected a farm, they had solidified a legacy, their spirit of resilience woven into the very fabric of Cedar Creek, rippling like roots running deep into the soil, ensuring they would always stand together against whatever storm might come their way. The tranquility of the sunflower fields swayed gently in the evening breeze over Maple Farm, a place touched by the hands of generations. But just as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and lavender, a rumble shattered the calm. 3 motorcycles roared into view, kicking up dust like an approaching storm cloud. In an instant, the air turned thick with tension, a sense of danger creeping through the very roots of the farm. Inside the cozy farmhouse, 16-year-old Emily stood by the kitchen window, her heart racing as she watched the bike skid to a halt. "Mom, Dad," she called out, fear tightening around her chest like a vice. Her father, Mike, stepped in from the back, wiping his hands on his worn apron. He followed her gaze and his brow furrowed. The smiles plastered on the bikers' faces as they dismounted made his gut clench. "Those are the reckless," Emily said, her voice shaking. Mike exchanged a glance with his wife Laura, who had just joined them. Inside her eyes flickered a mixture of worry and steely determination. "We need to protect our land," she whispered, gripping the edge of the counter. Mike stepped outside without hesitation, heart pounding with protective instincts and a primal urge to defend what his family had built. He commanded, striding purposefully toward the approaching group. Jake, the leader of the reckless, called, his voice dripping with mockery. He flashed his teeth, the grin of a wolf stalking its prey. Mike demanded, planting his feet firmly in the dirt, squaring his shoulders against the encroaching threat. Laughter erupted among Jake's crew, echoing ominously through the field, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere like a knife. "Come on, old man," Jake replied, swaggering forward, his bravado masked thinly with contempt. "This isn't fun." Mike retorted, muscles tense as he felt the eyes of his family on him from the safety of the house, their breaths caught in uncertainty. One of the gang members laughed, gesturing. They had come intent on wreaking havoc, fueled by thrills and a disregard for anyone else's pain. "Get inside," Mike urged Laura, who had stepped to the door. But she remained rooted, fear sparking within her as she collected unyielding resolve. "No, together we stand," she said firmly, joining her husband on the porch. The reckless halted, their laughter faltering for a brief moment. They hadn't expected this kind of resistance from a small farming family, certainly not the kind of resolve forged in years of hardship and love for the land. Emily couldn't just watch. Something welled up within her, courage igniting like wildfire. "You think you can come here and destroy our lives?" she shouted, stepping next to her parents. Jake glanced at her, a challenge glimmering in his eyes. Emily felt the heat rise in her cheeks but held her ground. "Fight you with everything we have," The confidence radiating from their small family began to weave unseen threads binding them tightly together. There was power in that power Jake was beginning to comprehend too late. "Look at you three," Jake sneered, stepping forward defiantly. "You really think you can stand up to us?" He turned to his gang, instigating laughter again, but it was weaker this time, uncertain, fun. Mike roared, fury boiling inside him. "This isn't just a piece of land, it's our family's history." Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind the gang, cutting through the tension. It was Hank, their neighbor, tall and broad-shouldered, armed with a shovel, followed closely by a few other farmers, each bringing their own tools of the trade: pitchforks, crowbars, spades. The Reckless turned, the laughter fading as they registered the growing line of farmers forming a cohesive wall of determination. A unity ignited among them, filled with years of shared struggle and love for the land they all called home. Here, friendship had grown deep roots, intertwined through shared labor and hardship, and in that moment they stood unbreakable. Mike felt a burst of pride swell within him as more farmers rallied behind him, tools raised high. "We fight for our land," he shouted, the words flowing like a battle cry into the waning light. Jake looked at his crew, uncertainty etched into his smirk. "This is ridiculous, let's just have some fun." The farmers tightened their ranks, locking arms and stepping forward. "You don't get it," Laura interrupted. "This is more than just fun for you, this is our way of life." Emily felt exhilarated, the warmth of her community wrapping around her like a blanket of courage. Rattled by the fierce resistance, Jake's bravado waned. He asked, but without the earlier confidence. He turned to his gang, searching for a hint of support, but found uncertainty instead. With a deep breath, Mike stepped forward, gripping the shovel tightly. He felt the strength of many generations pushing through him, urging him on, grounding him to the earth beneath his feet. An uneasy silence fell for a moment before Jake hissed, "Enough." The Reckless crew surged forward, and the farmers rallied, standing firm. Chaos erupted, shouts filled the air, and Emily's heart raced as she bobbed and weaved through the fray. She swung her pitchfork, finding her place among neighbors who had become her allies at that moment. Every swing of a shovel, every thrust of a pitchfork was more than a response to aggression. It was a proclamation that they would not be cowed. The unity among the farmers became a palpable force, driving them forward like a tsunami. Hank shouted, swinging his shovel with fervor as a Reckless member stumbled back, the color draining from his face. The backlash of surprises surged through the Reckless, and the laughter they had summoned began to dissipate, replaced by panic. Emily felt a jolt of empowerment surge through her. This was more than a farm. It represented every blessing, every sacrifice they had endured as a family. She was fighting for her childhood, for her parents, and for the roots that anchored their family to the earth. As the chaos swelled, she could see that their unity struck fear into the hearts of the Reckless. They were skinning deeper into panic as blurred faces tried to navigate the rising tide of farmers determined to protect their legacy. With every pushback, the Reckless grew weary, their attacks losing momentum. Emily caught a glimpse of Jake, his expression shifting from bravado to disbelief. He shouted, scanning the crowd for allies, but there were none left to be found. Someone yelled from the dwindling crew. And in that moment of surrender, chaos turned into a desperate scramble. The Reckless turned tail, retreating back toward their bikes, leaving behind echoes of defeat in their wake. The farmers surged forward, using their collective strength to reclaim their land. Mike roared, the sound resonating like a thunderclap, echoing through the fading shadows of the evening. As the gang scrambled onto their motorcycles, adrenaline shot through the air. They roared away, tires kicking up dirt and debris, leaving the farmers still standing strong, furious, and victorious. Cheers erupted from the assembled crowd as triumph filled the air. Emily felt alive, enveloped in warmth, pride swelling within her. They had transformed fear into fortitude, standing together, fierce and united against those who would threaten them. But as the last of the gang disappeared down the road, a chilling realization settled over the farmers. The Reckless would return. They had ignited a firestorm of resistance, and the fight was far from over. Stay vigilant, Mike warned. We've won today, but they won't forget this. Emily's heart raced again, but this time with anticipation. They had defended their home against oppression, and with the fire of community behind them, she knew they wouldn't back down again. The tension hung in the air, unsteady and fragile, yet filled with the unmistakable tang of resilience. They gathered, huddled together, sharing stories of their daring defiance. It was a celebration of unity forged in struggle, a reminder that the bond they'd created would serve them well when the Reckless returned. Defending their home had awakened something primal within them, a roaring spirit that would echo through the fields long after the sun had set. Then came the chilling sound of an engine in the distance, echoing down the road toward them again. It was low, like thunder on the horizon, and the farmers turned slowly, eyes widening in realization. Get ready, Mike said, fear and determination blazing in his eyes. And as the sound grew closer, a wave of apprehension fell over the crowd. Would they be ready for the reckoning that was about to unfold? Would their community stand united again? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, as the roar of engines grew louder, spilling out like the dark tide of night. In the fading light, Maple Farm stood resolute and defiant. The reckless were coming back, but this time they would face not just a farmer and his family, but an impenetrable wall of unity forged through fire, prepared to protect what they loved at any cost. The battle was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher.